Hoy vamos a hablar de la anexión de
Okay, I'll call us back to order, and we have no minutes to approve, so we will move to staff briefing, and we are dropping item 5.1. We're going to take that up at a future meeting, so we will move to 5.2, which is the Creek Week update.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Piccinini. I'm a research and program coordinator with our Stormwater and Creeks team in the Water Department. I'm here just to give you a quick update on our Creek Week plans this year. I brought you each a flyer and our new Creek Trails map, which is newly printed, and we're pretty excited about having it available for our residents. This week, we're hosting a Creek to Coast cleanup down at the Olive Park Footbridge on Saturday, September 16th, and I'd like to invite each of you to join us. And also this year, we're tapping in on the power of our social media and hosting a photo contest, encouraging people to get a map and find a Ours to Protect Creek name sign and take a selfie and submit it for a weekly prize throughout September. We're also filming a green car wash video that'll debut on our Facebook page during the week, along with some other pollution prevention-related messages. Or do you have any questions?
Any board member questions? Looks like it'll be an exciting week with a lot of activity. I'm sorry I'm not going to be around for it, but hope it goes very well.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 items on the consent calendar.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I would second that.
Motion by Board Member Arnone and seconded by Board Member Dowd to approve items 6.1 and 6.2. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have one abstention, or one missing. Item 7.1 is a report item regarding the project work order approval for our water reuse plant flood protection program.
Good afternoon, Chairman Galvin, members of the board. Thank you, Gina. My name is Tracy Duenas, Supervising Engineer with Capital Projects Engineering. I am sitting on behalf of Andy Wilk. He's the project manager. He is not here this week, so I'll be presenting this. Today we bring forth a project work order approval for the professional engineering design services for water reuse plant flood protection project. Today I'll briefly go over some geography background with some historical information with recent floods over the last 50 years, some mitigative efforts the city has gone forth in the last 2 years to protect against flood wall, as well as proposed flood protection moving forward, as well as what the city has just recently gone under in terms of request for proposal, along with some associated work order costs. Okay. As we look at the watershed that has caused flooding in the recent years, it's very vast. Covers over 7,500 acres. In the picture here, the boundary is the yellow. It has 14 miles of waterways. It comprises almost 10% of the total Russian River drainage. It has Myakama Mountains to the north, Sonoma Mountains to the east, and Gold Ridge Mountains to the southwest. Our focus for this project will only be the lower quadrant, the 1/3 quadrant to the south that's tributary to the plant and affects the plant. So moving forward, any studies will be focusing on that area. When we talk flood hazards, what's often referred to as a reference is the FEMA flood maps. What you see right here is an indication of the 100 and the 500-year flow. The plant's right in the center with the surrounding areas. When people talk about the 100-year flood, that's not an event that occurs once every 100 years. It's actually a 1% annual chance that it'll occur yearly. Likewise with the 500-year flood event, it's a 0.2% occurrence annually. So some people need to understand that. FEMA maps currently in this area are outdated. They don't represent the current existing condition. And as we move forward, I'll discuss what the city's intent is moving forward. Some recent events that occurred in the last 50 years, in the mid-50s and 60s, there were major flooding in Guerneville and Sebastopol, respectively. The plant was constructed in the mid to late 60s, and in 82, 85, heavy storms as well. And as we all know, the 2005 and 6 New Year's Eve storm we refer to was equivalent to the 82 flood. It's documented that the 2005 flood was equivalent to what we believe is the 100-year storm. Here's a nice aerial photo of the plant looking northeast with Laguna on a dry day. And this is the same vantage point taken shortly after the New Year's Eve storm. And closer observation, you would see the Laguna has inundated Llano Road in its entirety in that area, along with nearly 1/2 of the southern part of the plant itself. In some areas, nearly up to 3 feet of water. Another vantage, same year, same event. This is looking at the clarifiers, looking northeast. Closer observation would indicate that the flood event came nearly 1 foot to compromising the clarifiers. It's hard to tell in this picture, but if you look to the right there, there's yellow boxes there. That's the load center, the south load center for the plant. It supplies power to the southern part of the plant. It's observed during that flood event that waters came up to nearly 6 inches of compromising that facility. Had that facility been compromised, it would have essentially had the whole southern part of the plant, including the UV, inoperable. Another vantage just showing how far north floods came. So in 2016, the city took some proactive measures and installed a temporary flood berm wall, if you will. It consisted of Lego blocks. You can see they look like Legos. The elevation top was set to protect against what we consider the 2005 flood. That was performed under a minor contract. And in 2007, that wall was tested. As you can see, it fared very well. To date, as it relates to this project, if you will, there's only been very few studies. There have been one feasibility study conducted in the late 2000s, along with a geotechnical investigation. That feasibility study, requested further enhanced hydraulic and hydrology analysis. We proceeded with another feasibility study in 2016, more comprehensive. And what that study indicated was more or less a flood berm wall combination consisting of gates, walls, berms, depending on where it is along the alignment. It may consist of one or the other. In its entirety, it's 6,500 linear feet. And on the westerly side, it's also protecting the compost facility and the geysers and reclamation pump station. As you can tell, on the north end, it's not proposed that those elevations are high enough. If not, they're just the same height of the wall. As we move forward from feasibility, we have split up the work in terms of environmental, in terms of a flood analysis, and today bringing forth the design. 3 consultants, 3 different scopes of work. The city thought it would be in the best interest of the city, due to the specialization of this work, to be split up. GHD has been given the environmental permitting, the CEQA services, and they are currently underway. As we assume at this point, it appears that an addendum to the existing IR, WPEIR, will be required for CEQA. Some of the agencies involved will be including EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Game, to mention a few, Building Department of the City of Santa Rosa. We will be dealing with some severe environmental resources out there, including biological resources, California tiger salamander, and seasonal wetlands, just to name a few. When we talk about the floodplain analysis, the city currently is proposing a flood berm that resides in the designated flood zone that sits now. And according to building code, that requires a building permit, which also requires a building flood review, which also requires an update to the FEMA maps. And as stated earlier, the FEMA maps currently do not represent current existing conditions. It would appear when the plant was originally built, those maps were not updated. So we will, as a city, move forward, update the maps, and in concert, they will be providing modeling that will contribute to the design elements of the flood berm overall design. Schaefer Wheeler has guides that scope. Moving on to the design, engineer design. Currently, we put out a request for proposal, solicited 40 firms, only 2 responded. In review of those the two responsive proposals, 4-person review committee looked at the proposals, and based off qualification, relative experience, technical experience, cost, and mainly their work plan, their strategy, Brelge and Race was the desired consultant in moving forward. If in further review of Brelge and Race's agreement, essentially they've broken it up into 2 phases. They put a heavy emphasis on what they consider the design development phase, what they refer to as actually project chartering. It will look at conceptual layouts, it will review sensitivity analysis, and it will also look at a risk-reward analysis. As they move forward, they will work heavily with Schaefer Wheeler, the modeler, and its methodologies to be sure that the city and its processes is determining the best flood flood reoccurrence interval. They want to weigh heavily on empirical, historical, known information versus storm modeling. So it's going to be a give and take. Moving forward, they want to develop strategies and decision trees to help serve and help city decide on what flood elevation would be best for this wall. When we're talking the wall, we know that the city, the building department will require nothing less than 100 year. FEMA requires something more, 100 plus 3, but they have a flexible, resilient framework that one can work within. B&R will help us truncate to that decision making. They also will work with Water Agency and the City of Rona Park in terms of seeing if there's any future detention type improvement projects that will affect the flood waters of Laguna adjacent to where we're talking. Once the appropriate water surface is established, B&R will work with city building standards, FEMA standards, to establish various conceptual layouts. And through these layouts, they will also perform a sensitivity analysis that will essentially vary the wall height as a function of various storm events. And what that will produce, we will be able to find out, well, based off certain flood wall heights, storm events, how much impact will that be to critical facilities in terms of equipment and replacement costs out at the plant. This information will be vital in terms of a risk-reward analysis. B&R will put this together as a technical report and work with the city in best serving what flood wall height we want to design for. Flood wall height is also a function of not just the pure construction, but a mitigative cost in the area. Environmental mitigation for CTS is extremely expensive, and so depending on where we are on the alignment of the wall, it may change between an earthen berm to a concrete type berm. Staff will bring this forth to the board, this tech memo, prior to actually moving forward with actual construction contract document implementation. In 2017, staff did bring before the contract review subcommittee this project work order, and it did move forward. The project work order is a value of $677,922 with the 10% contingency. And to the extent that it exceeds $500,000, it does require Board of Public Utilities approval. With that, Department of Water and Transportation and Public Works recommends that the Board of Public Utilities by motion approve project work order under the Master Professional Service Agreement with Brelgian Race Consulting Engineers, City of Santa Rosa, to provide professional engineering services for the Santa Rosa Regional Water Reuse Plant Flood Protection Project in the amount not to exceed $677,922. And with that, I would like to take any questions.
Board Member Dowd?
My comment about this is that I will be supportive of moving forward with this, and it really is around your 16 out of 17, the engineering design services that you're incorporating into this. I think anyone that knows floods and 100-year, 200-year, 500-year, they all have different heights and they all have different impacts, and you can't, it's not necessarily wise to go all the way out so that you've protected it 100% no matter what happens, but I think you've put in enough here in this design services contract so that staff and the consultant will be able to evaluate where and how to spend the money that we need to protect the plant. That's my thoughts.
Yep. Any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Grable?
Can you repeat again the name of the firm that you're using for the modeling? Is it the hydrology modeling?
Yeah, Schaff and Wheeler.
Shaft?
And Wheeler out of San Francisco.
How do you spell that?
SCHAFF and Wheeler. And they'll be performing revisions to the flood maps as well as the concurrent modeling efforts.
How outdated are those FEMA maps?
I don't know, but it's significant enough that they don't warrant anymore. It would appear that when the plant was originally built, those maps weren't updated. So.
Oh, original, okay. And that was 40 years ago?
Mid-60s.
Mid-60s, okay. Yeah, I just wondered then if current hydrological modeling, of course, includes propensities in climate shift and, like, you know, storms that we're seeing in Houston, for instance, increasing in severity and frequency. I'm just wondering because I know that any maps up until about 8 to 12 years ago wouldn't have those criteria in their modeling. Certain techniques that I know are pretty crucial now, but it sounds like they're going to update all of that.
Yes.
Any other questions? As was mentioned by Supervising Engineer Duenas, this did come before the Contract Review Subcommittee back in April and got a unanimous recommendation. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I would move approval of the proposed contract with Brelgian Race.
I will second.
Motion by Board Member Dowd, seconded by Board Member Watts to approve item 7.1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously with one absence. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 7.2 is a water supply update.
Good afternoon, Chairman Galvin and members of the board. So it's been a while since I've been here, but really that's because we've been having really great water supply conditions and not much has changed. So just thought we'd give the board a quick update on where things are. terms of Lake Mendocino, it's currently 81,365 acre feet, so that's the black line on this graphic before you. You can see we are still well above the target water supply curve, about 115.6% of the target water supply curve. Again, really due to the extraordinary efforts of our community to save water, as well as the significant rainfall that we've had this water year. So we're really, really in good shape. That orange dotted line is the target water supply curve, and you can also see some previous water years, 2015, which we were at the end of the 2014 drought, we were in really dire conditions. That's that purple line. And then we did receive a good amount of rainfall at the end of 2015 going into 2016, and so that's that green line, the 2016 water year. So really Lake Mendocino has been in good shape the last 2 years, so that's good news. In terms of Lake Pillsbury, it's currently at 40,627 acre feet, which is about 54.2% of the water supply pool. So again, for this time of year is in pretty good shape for that reservoir. In terms of Lake Sonoma, again, good news. Currently at 224,739 acre feet. I think as the board is aware, this reservoir typically holds anywhere from 3 to 4 years of water supply. So really, really good shape again in this reservoir. The black line is the current water year and where we are, and that is almost 92% of the water supply pool, which is 245,000 acre feet. And you can see there's the green line is the 2016 water year, the purple is 2015, and there's a roughly 10-year average, which is that orange line. So really good shape in both our reservoirs. So hopefully we'll continue to see some either average or above average rainfall this winter. If we do, I'm sure we'll be seeing pretty big releases because the reservoirs are so full, but would be good news for our area. Wanted to give the board an update on some legislation that we've been following pretty closely and keeping the board up to date on over the past year and a half or so. So we've been commonly referring to this as the Making Water Conservation a California Way of Life. This was in response to a executive order by the governor back in 2016 in relation to the emergency drought, and that executive order directed some state water departments or state agencies to develop a framework for long-term water use efficiency, focusing on 4 distinct areas, increasing basically efficiency or using water more wisely, reducing any kind of wasteful use of water, improving drought resiliency, really focusing on urban water shortage contingency plans, and then also focusing on improving agricultural efficiency. So we've been very closely following legislation that implements 3 of those areas because we don't provide agricultural water use. And the framework was finalized earlier this year, and water agencies throughout California, staff from various water agencies had worked together. Santa Rosa staff was also participating to really kind of help craft some legislation that would implement some of the recommendations, taking into account flexibility, local water supply sources, and recognizing that really it's at the local level is the best way to manage water resources. So to that end, some competing bills were released earlier this year. There were what was referred to as the Rubio bills, which were the bills that really were recommending or carrying language that took the language that was recommended by the water agencies and bringing that forward. Then there were the Friedman bills, which were language that was carrying forward the governor's executive order exactly as written, which roughly 120 water agencies had concerns with. Those bills were making their way through the various committees in both the Assembly and the Senate, and right before the legislative recess, The Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee gutted and amended both bills, threw out the language and all, and basically just created some placeholder bills that said, placeholder to implement Making Water Conservation a California Way of Life. They requested input from stakeholders. For Santa Rosa, we did bring a letter providing input to the City Council in August, so last month, and then that was submitted. And a number of water agencies as well as other stakeholders submitted a number of different letters providing input. And from that, 2 new bills have emerged. And it's actually going to be AB 1668, which is a Friedman bill, and SB 606, which is a Skinner-Hertzberg bill. Both bills are exactly the same, containing the same language. Unfortunately, they continue to contain some concerns related to flexibility and recognizing local water supply and recognizing local control of water supply. In particular, in relation to the target setting, really only providing one way to set a target instead of providing some flexibility for a couple different options. Really changed the way they're looking to enforce, giving a lot more authority to the State Water Board to make it more of a punitive type enforcement instead of being with the Department of Water Resources. And then also continued concerns related to how recycled water is factored into helping water agencies meet the targets. So we did earlier this week have the mayor sign letters opposing both bills, and we're continuing to follow this. There's a number of entities that are opposing the bills because of these concerns. Most have submitted oppose unless amended, which is what we did as well. The Senate Bill 606 is currently scheduled to be heard in Assembly Appropriations on Monday. And AB 1668 is currently at Senate Appropriations with it's referred to that committee, but no date has been set for a hearing. So we're continuing to follow that, and hopefully we'll have more information and at some point understand if these bills are going to go this year or if they're actually going to turn into 2-year bills, which is a possibility. Also wanted to let the board know that we are getting very close to finishing up our direct install toilet program. As the board may recall, this is a grant-funded program. We received almost $2.5 million of grant funds to install roughly 5,500 toilet packages. Due to various savings and other things, we had actually identified that we could install a few more. So currently through July, so a little bit behind because it takes us a while to get all the data in from our installers, but through July we've installed 5,670 toilet packages, so over and above what was required for the grant. And we're anticipating through the end of the program that we will hit around 6,250 toilets. That's what we believe will be installed. And we will be ending the program on October 31st. So we've continued to put information out, but that's the end of when installations will occur. So great program, and we'll be finishing up and finalizing all the grant reporting, which is due by the end of this year.
I got my toilets and my shower heads about 6 weeks ago, and they're great.
Oh, good. We've had a lot of really positive feedback, which has been nice. So I'm glad that you've had a good experience. And then last, wanted to let the board know that, as we're shifting to the fall and as we had this weird little sprinkle event today, we're expecting rainfall to occur. And so we're going to start transitioning our messaging. We'll continue to have information on watering recommendations through the end of this month, but then we start transitioning in next month to encouraging customers to turn their irrigation systems off. We'll watch the weather, see how things are going, but typically that's our recommendation starting in October, and we'll go through March. So we're going to start getting that messaging out. That's my quick report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Any board member questions?
Thank you.
Director, thank you. Any public comments on non-agenda matters? We have no referrals or written communications. Any subcommittee reports? Board member reports? I will report that Board Member Badenfort and I are sitting on the selection panel for the Organic Materials Processing Center project, and we've met once and had a conference call, and the board will be hearing more about this as we move forward on that one. So I want to thank Board Member Badenfort for agreeing to sit on that panel with me. Director's report?
Thank you, Chair Galvin. I do have a few brief items. As a note, our hydration station was out this last weekend with the Santa Rosa Marathon, providing water to many thirsty athletes and spectators, and continuing to send a message that brings of reusable bottles and the like, the quality of our water. We do have a legislative and additional item I wanted to share beyond what you heard from Director Burke. This is in regards to stormwater. And for years, there's been an effort by many to see if we could look at stormwater in context of Proposition 218, similar to how we deal with water and sewer infrastructure. Specifically, the legislation redefines sewer to bring in stormwater systems, so it would come under that rubric. As in most, if not all legislation, there's a variety of perspectives on things, and the expectation is the legislation is now passed and it's on the governor's desk, and the expectation is that it will be signed, yet there will also be follow-on litigation on this issue from folks that like the current system that has a rather high bar of setting fees for stormwater versus where this would go, similar to water and wastewater. But regardless, at some point, hopefully the fog will clear, and the city, like all cities in California, will be able to look to developing a stormwater enterprise similar to what we have for water and wastewater, and we'll see how that goes, and we'll keep the board apprised. A couple operational items. The biosolids land application season has started, and South County deliveries have begun, and North County will start shortly, and we're in the process of applying lime that we do initially for pH adjustment as part of that operation. Did want to note that our combined heat and power operation, of course, where we combust digester gas for renewable energy, is potentially going to be disrupted, and it's a somewhat complex issue where we're required to do maintenance on the engines to meet a certain hours, and this part and some other activities are impacted as the city is revamping our procurement process and causing some unexpected delays. And we're having success working through those, but there's a possibility that we're doing everything we can not to interrupt the engines, because then, of course, we'd be flaring the gas and have the loss of renewable energy generation and all the other value that brings beyond the offset on our energy demand. Did want to note an item due to rapidly deteriorating conditions on the sewer main on Simpson Place, which is slated for the end of September. Staff is monitoring this sewer main several times a day to ensure we don't have an overflow. It's quite a structural issue that we're hoping, and we will this month, get a contractor out to fix it, but we are doing every effort to stay on top of it to ensure we don't have sewer overflow that we could potentially prevent. Staff is working on developing an effort in consideration that certainly in advance we'll bring to the board for discussion, a look at our approach and model, and specifically the rates to our agriculture customers as we continue the transition from thinking about that operation as effluent disposal and bring it more into the reuse arena consistent with our urban reuse program. Staff does expect active engagement of the agricultural community that will, we wouldn't be surprised if the board gets involved in various ways as that were we to move forward with that. So we wanted to share, but we will be talking about that further well before we kick off that project, given likely sensitivities from key stakeholders. And that's my report.
Any questions for the director? Okay, as we adjourn, I'm sure you all are aware that the city and the community lost two excellent individuals this last week. Long-term Water Department employee Gail Chavez and former Mayor Skylar Jeffries both passed away this week. So I'd like to adjourn this meeting in their honor and send our condolences to both of their families. We are adjourned.